Hi, Not Board Gamers, and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now in today's episode we're going to be looking at a game which came out at the back end of last year and caused a bit of a stir because it hits that holy grail, that mecca that a lot of gamers are looking for. It's a hybrid game and it's a hybrid deck building worker placement game. Now there were two that came out in fairly quick succession last year and both have been very, very well received. There of course is today's game that we're talking about, and that is Dune Imperium from Direwolf, and then of course there's also the Lost Ruins of Arnak, another deck building worker placement hybrid game which was released by CGE, that's Chick Games Edition, around about the same time. I think Arnak came out a little bit clearer. We're only going to be discussing Dune Imperium today. We'll talk a little bit further on in the video about my thoughts on the differences between Dune Imperium and Lost Ruins of Arnak, and which I think is the better game. But Dune Imperium is what we're going to be discovering today. So Dune Imperium is obviously based on the sprawling Frank Herbert universe of Dune, and we know this is a series of books that is much beloved by many, many, many people. Of course, there is the mid-80s film from David Lynch, the sprawling epic starring Sting and Cal MacLachlan from Twin Peaks. And next, well, at some point this year, and it should have come out last year, is the Denis Villeneuve film Dune starring Timothée Chalamet. And this looks absolutely fantastic. Now, originally, Dune Imperium was obviously lined up to be released around about the same time as the movie, but of course the movie has been delayed with COVID, and hopefully at some point we'll see it this year. So Direwolf took the decision to release Dune Imperium at the back end of last year, and I'm so glad they did, and you'll understand why I kind of like this game as we talk a little bit more about it. So what is Dune Imperium? So Dune Imperium, as I mentioned, is a deck-building worker placement game for 1 to 4 players. Being Not Board Gaming, we're only going to talk about the solo experience, and the solo experience is managed by an AI, and then this AI controls, as a solo player, not one, but 2 opponents. More on that in a bit. Now, in Dune, what you're going to do is you're going to play one of the 4 houses, and the 4 houses that you're playing are, and forgive my pronunciation here, the House Atreides, the House Ricasi, the House Thorvald, and the House Harkonnen, and you're going to play one of the leaders of these 4 houses as you battle against 2 of the other houses to maximise your victory points, to spread your kind of might across the galaxy, competing in combat on various planets, gaining influence with certain factions on there, trading in water, in Solari, and in the rather these days unfortunately named spice. No, it's not a drug smuggling game. Spice is a resource here, and if you remember anything about Dune, then spice comes from these desert planets where these giant sandworms kind of make things very, very difficult for anybody wanting to mine spice. Taking place over an undetermined series of rounds, the aim of Dune Imperium is to acquire the most victory points, and the way that you decide who's got most victory points is when the first person hits 10 victory points. That doesn't mean they've won. What they do at that point is they trigger the end game, and the various factors that mean that you can have further victory points added at the end of the game. So even if you're not winning, when the 10 victory point level threshold is hit and it triggers the end game, there is still a possibility that whatever you've got in your arsenal in terms of some of the cards that you can have can trigger additional victory points and win you the game. And that really is it. You're going to be playing, as I say, against 2 AI in the solo mode, using either the deck of cards that comes with it, or as most people have found better, the AI app companion on the Direwolf digital site, which controls a deck of cards and provides a little bit of variability in there as well. But again, we'll talk about that in a wee while. Confession time. I have never read Dune. I may have back in the 80s seen the movie, but some 40 years have passed since potentially that, so I can't remember exactly. A lot happened in those intervening years. And obviously we do have the upcoming film, which looks great. So I'm not really that totally aware of anything that happens within Dune. I have some periphery knowledge. So when you first get the game, you get this kind of, this rather regal-looking box with the desert planet on there and the dune in kind of looking gold up there. It looks good. And when you then open the box and dive in, you're hit with this overwhelming wall of page and brown and black, because let's face it, on the surface of it, what you see on the Dune Imperium board is not that inspiring. We have a lot of fairly muted colours on here. We have the greens, the yellows, the reds, the blues, and then the planet itself, which is largely sand coloured. However, it kind of thematically makes sense. The more that you understand about how the game plays and what you're trying to achieve, you feel kind of locked into that world, and it makes sense. Now, this is problematic not for this game necessarily, but for a game like, say, Pendulum. And if you watch my video, you know I'm no fan of Pendulum at all as a solo game. And one of the a major thing in Pendulum, although it didn't affect my view because the gameplay was god-awful for solo, but the artwork was just so muted and so abstract, it made no sense. At least in Dune, it makes sense. It fits in with the theme of it. We don't go into Dune being expected to be blown away and kind of wowed by wonderful components, because in the base game there aren't. There's the board, there are a number of cards and some meeples, and that's really it. And then the odd tokens, basically, and that's really it. I do know Direwolf are releasing a kind of upgrade pack where you can bling everything out, so you'll get like minis for various factions and sandworms and things like that. Looks fantastic, but at a cost of $50, which is probably going to equate to about 50 quid in the UK. I don't necessarily see me going for that as much as I like the game of Dune. Given the scope of how you play it, then the thematics and the aesthetics of it, should I say, look good for what it is. A particularly good thing to know is the rulebook and the reference sheets that come with it. The rulebook it doesn't overly complicate things. It's only some, I don't know, maybe some 14 pages long, 15 pages long. There's a separate sheet for solo and then a reference sheet on what all the planets do. And in the main, it's very, very well laid out, because the game is not a complex game to play. It is a hybrid worker placement deck building game, but neither of those two mechanics are particularly complex within the game itself. I think in the rulebook for the solo setup, there's just a little bit of ambiguity around a particular setup in the solo game, and I had to look at the forums, kind of work it out, and I've seen other people ask questions, but I'll touch on that a wee while. Other than that, it's a very, very easy game to learn, because of that rulebook is fantastically well laid out and tells you more or less exactly where everything needs to be. So setting up the game is very, very, very straightforward. I'll go through the various components and constituent parts of it here. So here is my character, and I've chosen Paul Atreides here, House Atreides, and I've set up my board with a couple of my meeples. I've got one to the side, and I'll explain that in a bit. Some of my troops there, one kind of water resource, and three of these banners here. I've also got my starting deck of 10 cards as well. So there are 10 starting cards that everybody starts with. As you can see, they're here, and they're denoted by this. As the game progresses, I will get access to more and more cards, which will beef up my hands. Then at either side for the solo game, I've got the AI. Remember, you play against 2 AI in the solo game, and they start again with 2 meeples on there, with with a water resource, and also depending on what level you start at as well, they may have an intrigue card, and they may have other stuff. And also, if we look over here on the board, you can see there's some cubes there. You always start with 3 cubes, which is 3 of your troops in your kind of garrisoned up there. And for the AI, there are 3 levels. There is novice, novice, veteran, and expert. This is set up on veteran, so the middle level. On novice, they don't start with any troops garrisoned, but on veteran and expert, they start with troops garrisoned, and I've got 3 troops garrisoned up there for those as well. Over on the left-hand side of the board up here, we have the intrigue cards, and these are cards that you'll pull out throughout the game, or you will draw throughout the game, get access to, and they give you some kind of instant bonuses, some bonuses you can play at any point, and sometimes end game bonuses for getting victory points as well. Over here, we have the market. So there should always be 5 cards in the market. And I'll explain why the app handles that a little bit better than what is the kind of out-of-the-box solo experience that you get from Dune Imperium. However, there are ways you can house rule that to make it work. And those cards are obviously constantly in flux as new cards are pulled out. And here you have 3 constant piles of cards that you can always choose from. So you have the Arrakis Liaison, you have the Spice Must Flow, and you also have the Fold Space card, and you get to choose those from certain actions. Over on the board itself, we've got the various factions that you're going to align with there, and the further you go up here, the more chance you get of getting these victory points, and that's these little gold ones here. Remember I said that the first player to hit 10 victory points triggers the end game, and then the person that has most victory points wins the game. And there you have various spaces you can go on, and you can see around the board various other spaces you can go on as well. And that's where the worker placement element comes in, and at the top. Over on the right hand side is the, over there is the victory point track with everybody starting at the bottom. Down here is the combat track. I will explain how that works in a bit. And here we have the conflict cards, and this is set up slightly different for the solo game. I'll just explain how that works now. You see, whether it's a solo game or a multiplayer game, everybody starts with access to 2 meeples, which are always placed on their mat, and that's your workers you put on the board. But when you're playing the game, and if you're playing it multiplayer, for your actions and for the multiplayer actions, you can also unlock a 3rd meeple, which will always be on the side of the board, and that's your Swordmaster. And you do that by taking this action up here. However, for the solo AI, they don't. Basically, it's a timed action that gives them the 3rd player. So what you will do, depending on what level you're at, is at a certain point in your conflict deck, you will lay down their Swordmasters on there, and you will place a number of cards on top. So because I'm playing Veteran, I put 4 cards on top of that. That means in the after the 4th round is finished, they get access to an extra meeple, which gives them an extra action there. So that's how that works, and that is a slightly problematic rule in the rulebook. It doesn't fully explain what the Swordmasters are, and you have to just work it out a little bit, that it means you physically lay the AI's 3rd meeples in the conflict stack with a number of cards on the bottom on top of it, and then as soon as they're released, they're handed to the AIs and they get an additional meeple, whereas I obviously have to unlock my Swordmaster at the top. So just another couple of things to note now, and then that's it. That's everything that you need to know about the kind of setup of the game. Over on the right hand side over here is where we have our various resources. So the orange is spice, the blue is water, and the grey is solari. And of course it's a worker placement game, so therefore you will use these to buy additional actions or to buy other resources and to swap for resources and to help you upgrade certain things. And then down here we have the solo AI deck. There's also a few cards you can add to it if you're playing with 2 players, because as a 2-player game you would also add the AI to it. So there's the solo AI deck, and that's really easy to use, and I'll show you how that works. But I will absolutely guarantee that as soon as you start playing with the app, you will go to the app, and all the app does is control the solo AI, because it's just actually easier to work that way. But if you haven't got access to a phone, then the solo AI deck works absolutely okay. And that's it. That is everything you need to know about the setup of Dune Imperium. It's a relatively straightforward game to set up. So what do you do? So as I mentioned earlier, Dune Imperium is played over a series of rounds, and there are a number of actions in each round that happen. So at the round start, the person who has, or the AI that has the marker token will take their first go. And the first thing that's going to happen is going to take their player turns, and this is where we kind of go round in order, and we place each one of our meeples. And there we go, we can see meeples here, and I'll explain how that works, because from my perspective, I have to use whatever cards I have as a kind of driver as to where I'm placing my meeples. Slightly different for the solo AI. That just draws a card from the deck, and it tells it what it wants, what it needs to do. So there you can see, if I was to draw this particular card, the meeple that had the AI that was taking that turn will place one of its troops on, one of its meeples on the Highliner planet, and there's a combat symbol on there. So if it had it, it would also place some troops on there, and it would get an additional 3 troops into its supply. The bottom of the card, I'll come on to that anatomy in a little bit. That's in when it gets to combat there. Okay, from my perspective, I would use these cards to place my agents on the board. Now, if we look at these cards, there are a number of icons that you can see. Here on the right-hand side of these cards, and then here in these kind of little boxes here. And each space on the board has an icon, so wherever I can place my meeple is dependent on whether I have any of those icons available to me on my cards. However, you don't just want to place them, because sometimes you want to keep these cards for some of the combat actions or some of the other actions that are on there. What also happens as well on some of the cards is they have an additional action on there. So, for example, this card, I can place my meeple on any of the spaces that has got a green hexagon, a blue square or a yellow triangle, and that's generally the spaces in the middle of the board. Once I place them, I also take this action here, and each character has a different action for this. And for me, for Paul Atreides, if I played this card, I place my meeple on one of these places, and I'd also take this additional action, and for me, it's to pull another card from my deck. So every player has these special actions, if you like, and even the AI has those. And that's how you would place them out on the board. You would do that until you placed all of your meeples. Then, once you place your meeples and there are no more actions to do, you would then do your reveal action. And this is where you kind of reveal the cards that you've got in your hand, and there are two things on there on the cards that you can see. So the cards you've got left, there are two icons at the bottom of the cards that I want to talk about. This one here is effectively your the cost of that you have available for upgrades, basically. So each card that you buy from the marketplace has a cost involved in it. The more of this that you have, obviously, the more cards you can buy. So, for example, this particular card in the marketplace, which is the power play card, would cost 5. So therefore, I would have to have enough cards left in my hand to have a cost of 5 on there. And then I would buy this card, which would allow me access onto these particular spaces, and it would also give me this action, which is to gain 2 influence instead of 1, and then trash that card when it's played. Okay, and then the other action that you would say for the combat is this here, and this helps you in your combat, and I'll come on to that in a sec. But when you reveal cards, it's all about buying stuff, and if you have any cards with this icon, that helps you buy cards from there. So place your agents, then you place your reveal action, then you move into combat. I'll come on to combat slightly separately. Then we've got the makers part of the round, and that's where wherever there's a sandworm on the board, you're going to add an additional spice onto there. So the spice continues to flow. And then you recall. So you recall your meeples. Any troops that you put out on the board, you put back into your supply. And that's it. You will start the round again. And that happens on a continual basis, as I say, until the first player has triggered 10 victory points. So what we'll do is we'll actually go into a round or so of the game, and I'll show you exactly the flow of how the game works and how the solo AI works in a game round. Okay, so the game is now all set up for a solo game. We're going to use the deck of cards because, the app is going to be difficult to show on camera, although ordinarily I would use the app, and I'll explain as we go through that why I would use the app. So I'm in the middle here. I've got one AI to the left over here, which is Count Ilban Rikazi. I'm Paul Atreides, and over here on the right is the other AI, which is going to be Earl Memnon Thorvald. We've got their starting resources with them, so they both start with water and an intrigue card, and I just start with water. And because I'm on the veteran difficulty, everybody's got 3 troops in their garrison, the rest in their supply there. So we've all got our 2 meeples on the board. Everything is set up. The first thing we're going to do is turn over a conflict card. So this is your timer for one of the timers for the game. If ever you run out of conflict cards, then what happens is that that can also trigger the end of the game, as well as reaching 10 victory points. And when we get to the combat round, we'll see how this works. But if you come first, so you've got more combat troops on there and you get more conflict points, what's going to happen is you're going to move up on one of the faction boards. The further up you get on those, then the better the benefits are. You can get victory points, you can get resources for it, and also take 2 Solari. Whoever comes first, second just takes 3 Solari, and third takes 2 Solari. You have to have troops from the garrison onto the board itself to actually qualify. If you don't, you don't qualify there. So that's okay. That's the first combat card on there. All right. So that's kind of set the status for the round. The next thing we're going to do is take the first AI turn. He's got the starting token, so it's quite simple. We turn over this top card, and as you can see here, he's going to deploy to Carthag. And what this means, you've got this little cross here, this little cross swords thing. It's basically going to put troops out there. So what happens here is he's going to move his meeple first of all onto Carthag. There we go, which is up there. He's also, when he deploys, if he's got troops in his garrison, he's going to take 2 troops from his garrison and deploy them onto Carthag also. And as you can see, he's got 3 troops. He's going to take 2 of those and put those on there. Finally, he recruits a troop from his supply. And what he does, if it's a combat action and he's recruiting troops, that troop will also, or how many troops he recruits, will also go to where his combat space is. So he's already up there on the conflict space, should I say, up there on Carthag, and he has a total of 3 troops up there. It's nice and easy. That's a fairly straightforward action for him. He's making a bid for conflict. This means at the moment he's in the lead for moving up on the factions board and also getting 2 Solari. Okay, so that's his first go gone. We're going to go over now to Earl Memnon Thorvald there, and we'll take his first card now, which is going to be Carthag. Now, he can't move on to Carthag because, of course, Count Ilban Ricase is up on Carthag. So when you unveil a card that's got an action he can't take, all you do is draw the very next card. And this is Harvest Spice. Now it says, send an agent to the space with the most bonus spice or total spice if tied. If no spaces have bonus spice, reveal another card. And of course, it's a combat action. Now, here in the middle of the board, 1, 2, 3, are your harvest spaces where spice is harvest. There are no bonus spice until the end of the first round when bonus spices comes on there. So had this been in round 2, he would have had a look for whichever space would have had the most bonus spice. However, because there's none, we have to draw a third card. And what's going to happen here? Okay, he's going to deploy troops from his garrison to Arakeen. He's going to also recruit 1 to send to Arakeen. And he's going to take his special action, this signet action. So let's do the recruit first. So we move the meeple onto Arakeen. We move 2 of his troops, because he's got him in his garrison, onto there. And he also recruits 1 from his supply and puts that on there. Okay? But as I said, he's also got a signet action, which is a special action here. Now, each card has a signet action. If we look at Earl Memnon of Thorvald, it says here his signet action is that he gets a spice. So there we go. So at the moment, he's got 1 water and 1 spice. Why does that matter from an AI perspective? Because they never spend their resource. Where I have to spend resource to kind of offset for other goods and other duties, why does that matter? Well, from a solo AI perspective, what happens is that for every 7 spice, or every 7 of the Solari that they get, they trade in that and they get a victory point. Also, for every 3 water that they get, or every 3 intrigue cards they get, they trade those in and they get another victory point. So although they don't spend them per se to do actions, what they do is they will trade them in for victory points, so it's kind of important. Right, over to my first go now. So what I should have done right at the beginning is draw myself 5 cards out of my starting deck of 10 cards. So you start with 10 and I get the ability each round to upgrade them on the side here. And I can choose any of these cards now basically. So as we can see, these particular actions allow me to move onto any of the factions here. So they're the faction icons, which are these here. The further up these I go, then the easier opportunity I've got of hitting the victory points and getting some resources. And then these, so these green ones here, these green hexagons, or pentagons, hexagons, yeah, will allow me to go to the top of the board, which will allow me to kind of rally troops, get some troops, or potentially, if I've got enough Solari, get my 3rd meeple in. It's too early for that. Go to the blue spaces, which are here where I can put some combat actions or collect some spice from the yellow triangle spaces. However, I think what I'm going to do, because I've got the ability, is I'm going to play my diplomacy card to start off with, and I'm going to put one of my meeple over here on this particular Hardy Warriors space, because that's going to give me some extra troops and give me a chance of winning this conflict when it comes. So, as you can see there, it's got this particular icon here, which matches up to the Freeman space here. So I'm going to put my meeple there. I'm going to take 2 troops from my garrison, that's okay, and then I recruit 2 troops because of that icon there, which says recruit 2 troops. Now when you recruit, you can place them onto the combat space that you've moved onto or into your garrison. I'm going to place both of those I've recruited into there because I want to have a chance of winning this conflict. What I also do is I move my marker up 1 on the faction space just there, and you can see that I'm now 1 closer to getting that particular victory point, and as I go up I can win that faction token and get that. So that's my first go done. So that's, you can see it goes quite quickly. Secondly, we'll move on to back over to Count Ilban Ricase, and what he's going to do is he's going to place 1 of his meeples on the selected breeding space on the Bene Gesserit faction board and move 1 up there. Okay, so there we go. He's going to place it on selected breeding, which is there. Doesn't take these actions on there, and he moves just up there. Okay, so that's a blocking action, and he's already ahead on there, getting close to that victory point. Move back over to Earl Memnon Thorvald. Okay. Oh, he's going onto the fold space now, and he's going to put his meeple up there and move one on the fold space, which is that space there on the Spacing Guild faction. Okay, so we'll put his meeple there and move his meeple one up there. Back round to me for my final action. Right, I've got some combat stuff there, and this might be kind of a good one to play again. Because what I could do is I could play it onto the Freeman space, play my last troop from there, get a water back for playing there. Oh, sorry, there was a water cost when I played my first one there, so that water should have gone. There we go. So yeah, I think I'm going to do that, and it moves me and gets me a victory point, to tell you the truth. So we're going to play this here. It's got the Freeman action on it again, so I will put that there. I will place that on there. I'm going to get a water back because I paid a water for the first one I did, and now I'm getting a water back. But I also, what happens is I move one space on there and across there, so I get that victory point. And there we go. I'm already in the lead. I move my troop onto there as well from my garrison. I don't have any more troops, but I have 5 on the board now. Now these guys are gone. They've got no more moves left. I've got no more agent moves left. It's now time to do my reveal actions. Sorry, one thing I should have done when I played this card is as you can see at the bottom, it says trash this card. Remember, whenever you play a card, if you're playing it as your agent action, you also work the text here. So trash this card, it means this card is put out of the game now. So there we go. Okay, so now it's time for my reveal actions. So when you do your reveal actions, you then reveal whatever cards you have left in your hand that you haven't used. And the first part of the reveal action, which only applies to you in the solo game, is going to be the ability to buy new cards, i.e. upgrade your deck. Bear in mind, I already had to trash 1 card, so my deck is now down to 9 cards, so it would do me well to buy these cards. Now the cards in the left that are in the market phase, as soon as you take one of those, they get kind of, and you can buy those at this stage, they get kind of replaced at any time. The cards at the bottom, they're the same on each deck going down there. The only one you can't buy in the market phase is the fold space. You have to take that when you get the fold space action card. So if we look at what I got this card that I didn't play, and it's the only card I've got that's got the cost on there, and that gives me 1. So I can spend 1. Unfortunately, these cost 5, 4, 4, 5, and 5. That's quite an expensive deck up there. That actually does me nothing there. So I can't actually buy a card in that space. However, had I got, I don't know, this totaling up to 4 points, so I've got a number of cards where that totaled up to 4, I could have chosen any of those 4 from there and added those to my discard pile so that they would have been drawn out the next time, or one of the times that I've shuffled that and played that. However, that's my purchase action done, which is not to be done, basically. So then we move on to combat. Remember, combat is where you win what's on the conflict there. So for combat, it's fairly straightforward. We have these markers here, and these are going to be our point. These are going to track our points. So we'll start with the Count Ilban Rikazi, because he's the first player, and we'll do his combat. You get 2 points for every troop that you have on the board. So 2, 4, 6. So he gets to 6 there. But what also we do as well is we're going to flip over the top card of the IR deck, and we're going to look at whatever this figure is at the bottom here, how many red swords there. That will give him additional points. So there we go. He's got 1. So he's got 7 points. So then we look over here at Earl Memnon Thorvald. Again, he's got 3 there, so that's 6. And we flip over that. Oh, and he's having 3, so he's got 9 points in total. Right, then we're going to go over to me. And if we look at me, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've already got 10 points on there. Yeah, but the cards that are left in my hand that I haven't used, each one of these has another sword symbol. So that is going to give me a total of 12 points. They now go in my discard pile. And there you can see that I have now won this conflict here. So I've come first, Earl Memnon Thorvald come second, and Count Ilban Rikazi has come third. So I get to move up on a faction board, and I also get 2 Solari. So let's do that first. Let's get the 2 Solari, and let's choose which faction board I want to move up on. Okay, so I'm in the lead here, but I've already got that there. And behind there, I could take the top one. In fact, that's what I'll do. I'm going to move up on the Conspire faction board. And there we go. That moves me one closer there to getting that point. Okay, and we know that coming in second is Earl Memnon Thorvald. He's going to get 3 Solari. Remember, when he gets 7, he can trade those in for a victory point. And then Count Ilban Rikezi is third because he did get on the board, and he's going to get 2 Solari. Nope. 1 and 2. There we go. And again, so he's starting his journey in collecting Solari. He has 1 water, 1 intrigue card, 2 Solari, 1 intrigue card, 1 water, 3 Solari, 1 spice, and I've got these to spend in consecutive in subsequent turns. Okay, the final thing we're going to do is we're going to recall our players to the board. Okay, so we recall all our meeples back to our own boards. 1, 2, and 3. Any troops that were on the board, not in the garrison, get returned back to the supply, not into the garrison. Okay, there we go. So you can see now that in the garrisons for the next round, I've got to think about recruiting. I've got none. They've got 1 each in there. Those get put back to 0. Okay. And now we do the makers part as well. And what the makers part is on each of these planets, each of these worm planets here, we start adding a bonus onto there. They have manufactured spice. So there we go. They've now created spice there. So if I was to take this action next go, and I was play 2 water, and I had a card that had a yellow triangle on there, and I could take that action and place my worker there. I'd place troops on there if I had it, and then I would gain 3 plus however many spice have been manufactured on there that haven't been taken, and that would give me a total of 4 spice. Okay, so we can see end of round 1. We are in a position now where, it's. I'm in the lead. I've got a victory point. They are still both on 0 victory points. However, that won't last for long. Now, what we do now we've recalled, is we move the first player marker over to the next player, which is going to be the next AI. We reveal a new conflict card. Oops. This is where that's just a little bit awkward. Oh, and here we see. This is now a round 2 conflict card. And if we win, whoever wins conflict here gets use of the Mentat, so that's a 1 round use of an additional worker. Also gets to have an intrigue card, and that's these cards here, and I'll explain why they're really important. And also gets 2 Solari, then an intrigue card and 2 Solari, and then 2 Solari. Okay, so now we would do the whole process again, starting with Earl Memnon of Thorvald and continue through it. Of course, once we've gone through the first 4 of these, that is going to uncover the additional workers for the 2 AI, and of course that gives them an additional turn each round, which means that I at some point have to think about upping my Solari to buy my Swordmaster. And that's how a round plays, and those rounds will continue until the first person triggers 10 victory points. At that point, the end game will come in, and that's when you'll start totting up who's got the most victory points, and that can be affected in a number of ways. Of course, the beauty in the game is about kind of what you do in one action to kind of allow you to carry out another action, and how your strategy is going to pan out, and that's really, really important. And your strategy kind of adapts and changes as the game progresses based on what's happening with the solo AIs that you're playing against. So maybe you want to unlock your swordsmith, so your third meeple. To do that, you need 8 Solari. Maybe you don't have enough Solari, but you've got quite a considerable amount of spice. So there's an action you can take on the board which allows you to trade spice for Solari, and that's great, and that means you can do that, get Solari, and then maybe the action after that, you then recruit your swordsmith. Or maybe you want to start moving up on the faction board, so you're going to concentrate on there, trying to get those victory points on the faction boards before the AI gets there. And if at any point you're in front of that and the AI overtakes you, then they get first dibs on everything, and you also can actually mean that you will start passing victory points back as well if you've got the AI faction banner as well. So maybe you want to do that, or maybe you want to concentrate on getting spice, or maybe combat is your thing because you really want to kind of maximise and win the conflict cards on there. There are many routes to victory. Of course, it's helped out by certain items on the board, and the key item on the board is the intrigue cards. Now, these are really, really useful, and certain actions on the board will allow you access to the intrigue cards. The AI gets intrigue cards, but it doesn't get to use them. It just, once it's got 3 intrigue cards, it will trade it in for a victory point. And there are essentially 3 kinds of intrigue cards. There are plot cards, which allow you to kind of carry these actions out at any point mid-game, at any point in the game, if you like. So for this one, if I got this card, I could play it, pay 2 Solari, and that would give me a move up on the faction, on any one of the faction boards. There are combat cards as well. So it's a staged incident here. So in a combat round, if I lose any of my 3 troops in the conflict, I would also gain a victory point. And then, importantly, there are the end game intrigue cards. And these really do change the back end of the game in terms of victory points there. So here, for example, I would have this and I would hold it in my stock. And then at the end of the game, if I'd got 3 influence or more on 3 faction tracks, I would get an additional victory point. If I'd got 3 influence or more on 4 faction tracks, I would get an additional 2 victory points at the end of the game. So that can change the end game, and it means that whoever's kind of triggered that end game doesn't necessarily win there. And of course, the key thing is building up your the deck building elements and building up from your starter deck. You start with 10 fairly rudimentary cards, and as you saw in my turn, I had to trash 1 card because I moved on to the Fremen there, so I'd only got 9 cards in my hand. Through using that kind of reveal cards action, where you have this point system at the bottom to allow you to buy new cards from the market, when you do that, you put them in your discard pile, and that means they've got a greater chance of shuffling, of getting out into the deck when you shuffle them. Once you've shuffled them, that's a great way to kind of start boosting the only way to boost your hand. And you can buy any number as long as you've got the required number of points there. So for example, had I got 4 of those points, I'd have been able to buy this Gunthopter card, which of course has 2 actions. If I was to use it as an agent action, I could place it on a circle or a triangle, and that would mean that each opponent loses 1 garrison troop, which is there. If I saved it to the end, it would give me an additional 3 combat there, and also allow me to deploy a troop from my garrison into the conflict. So it really allowed me to kind of boost my combat there as well. But you've got to have those points for that. And that becomes another thing. Do I play the card, or do I save it to have those points to gain those cards in the market? Once you've taken a card from the market, it goes into your discard pile, you automatically refill that space. And that, out of the box, is possibly the biggest thing that's wrong with the solo game of Dune Imperium out of the box. Because as good and as easy to operate as the AI is, you've got the multifunction cards where it either drives the AI action or it allows for the combat actions at the end. The key thing, the only way that you're actually going to win this game is to, as well as a worker placement, is having the right amount of cards. And as you just saw kind of at the beginning there, I had fairly weak cards left to allow me to buy anything from the market because they were all fairly high-priced cards. They were 4 and 5 points. And it's entirely feasible I could go through each hand and never have the amount of credits left, if you like, to buy cards from that market, and it would never change. You see, for whatever reason, in the out-of-the-box game, in the solo mode, there is no way to cycle the market, which just sounds absolutely crazy. A key thing on most kind of deck builders is the ability to cycle a market. And in the base game, there is no provision in the rules for cycling that market. Now, it's relatively easy to house rule that. You could, every 2 rounds, roll 2 dice and, then pick a number 1 to 5 from the cards and cycle those and move those down. And that's a fairly simple thing to implement. But to miss it out of the base rules is just... It's just a little bit absurd, really, because it's such a simple and kind of intuitive thing to do that deserves to happen in most deck builders where you buy cards from the market. Now, this is where the app comes into its own. So, of course, the app cycles through the cards, which is absolutely fine. It gives you the same abilities that are on the cards there. But every certain number of cards, it will pull a card out of the deck on the app, and that will require you to cycle at least 2 cards or two different cards from the market, and therefore you're keeping that market fresh. You're going through it, and I think that's a really, really, really good thing in the app. And I say it takes a little bit of house ruling in the base game, but it's kind of a silly omission for Direwolf to have done. So, what else? Because it's obvious from how I've spoken about this game that I genuinely like Dune Imperium. I think there's so much fun to be had here. But there are just a couple of niggles, as well as that market phase out of the box. Starting off as well is that you only get 2 leaders per faction, and the rules do say, kind of thematically, you shouldn't have two people from the same house competing against each other. Although, as a game, you can do whatever you want. It would be nice to see, and I don't know whether the books or the law allows for more leaders from there, but it would be nice to see a little bit more difference there as well. Also, the conflict deck as well. There are a certain number of cards, so there are 4. The cards are staged, the conflict cards are staged. The conflict level 1, conflict level 2, and conflict level 3. There are only 4 level 3 cards, and you use the same 4 level 3 cards in every game. So you're going to see kind of, you can work out at the end, as you play the game more towards the kind of final 4 rounds. Once you've played the first 2 of the conflict 3 cards, you know roughly with a 50-50 chance what the final 2 are going to be, and you can start adapting your strategy that way. I'd like to see more conflict cards just to allow some variability in there. So that's kind of, a slightly picky thing there. Yes, the artwork is slightly divisive, and it's slightly muted in everything that it does. It's not the end of the world. It feels thematic as well. I think the biggest gripe I have out of the box is with the solo rules is how it handles that market phase. I did initially kind of house rule it, so I was changing them myself, but then with the introduction of the companion app, that just does it for you anyway. I think the only other thing to say is it's potentially solvable. So I played it on the easiest setting, I think twice, and then I beat it on the second time of the easiest setting. I'm on the veteran setting now, and I played it a few times, and my win rate is kind of, I don't know, it's at about 30% at the moment. So I haven't played it on the expert level, but I don't know how solvable it is. I'm generally not the kind of person that is clever enough to do that. But if you're very adept at worker placement games, then you have the ability to potentially work out strategies that mean you stand a good chance of winning each and every time. The other thing is the card drafting, how you take those cards out of the market, because there will be rounds when you don't actually buy any cards. And therefore your hand is not going to increase, because as you saw in my first round there, I didn't have the ability to do that. What this also means as well as you're getting towards the back end of the game, so as the victory points are getting near to that 10 end game condition, you can probably see that your path is going to get those cards, or the AI is going to get those cards in the next go. It means that any cards that you're going to buy out the market, which go into your discard pile, are probably pointless, because you're never going to get the opportunity to use them. So I'd like to see a faster way of getting those cards into your hand, because maybe for the last couple of rounds, depending on how many cards you've got, you just think, well, what's the point, because I'm never going to get to use those cards anyway. And that potentially is a bit of a downer there. Game length wise, I think I'd actually like it to last longer in some respects. I'm kind of building my strategy, and that 10 victory point level is already reached. So maybe I'm kind of thinking, for some of my subsequent games, I'm going to set the threshold to 12. And that's great. That gives me a longer game there. I don't know what it would do for the balance in the game, but sometimes I genuinely want to play more. So, it's become almost synonymous when you speak about Dune Imperium that you have to mention Lost Ruins of Arnak. And I think it's probably a good point now to talk about both of them, because I had Lost Ruins of Arnak, and I played it maybe 8 times, and then I sold Lost Ruins of Arnak so I could buy Dune Imperium. And I've played Dune Imperium maybe 8-10 times now, and I have no plans to get rid of Dune Imperium. For me, I enjoy the solo experience of Dune Imperium more than I enjoy Lost Ruins of Arnak, and that's not to say Lost Ruins of Arnak is a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. Look, I think that the amount of player agency and decision space you get in Dune Imperium far exceeds what's in Lost Ruins of Arnak. There always seemed to be, for me, in Lost Ruins of Arnak, for the solo player, with what came out of the box, and the CG have released some subsequent more difficult solo AI cards to play with, and CG are great for that. But out of the box with Lost Ruins of Arnak, it's always seemed like there was a very linear path to victory, and it really didn't take much working out for me to do it. And I could beat it using all of the hard cards, basically. So all of the red cards that came in the base box of Lost Ruins of Arnak, I could beat it fairly comfortably. It didn't provide a challenge. I had a nice time playing it, but it didn't provide a challenge. Looks-wise, aesthetic-wise, Lost Ruins of Arnak is absolutely beautiful. You've got those fantastic jewels. You've got the various kind of little scrolls that you have. You have the wonderful board. You've got the monsters that you fight, which is a mechanism that's missing from here. You've got the relative, the slightly more, I would say, slightly more interactive solo AI deck as well. So I think in terms of mechanisms, although this is simpler and sleeker for the solo AI deck, the kind of implementation of a solo AI deck in Arnak was slightly better, although the difficulty was severely lacking, because once you worked Lost Ruins of Arnak out, then that was it. There was no challenge there. You were playing to have a nice time. Whereas with Dune Imperium, you have an adaptive strategy. You're playing against two AI who are operating slightly differently. Your AI, the player boards that you're playing against, have various strengths on there as well. So that is going to create a different strategy. And as you're playing the game, where they're placing and blocking really stops you doing actions. With Arnak, there were just, even if you block one action, there were just many paths to kind of do something else that would get me the victory points there. Here, I can get genuinely blocked. I can get genuinely left behind. And I've had games where there's been a bit of rubber banding, if you like, where whoever's in back has started to come right up and overtake, and I really like that about this. There are many ways for the AI to come and kick you in the teeth. So I think aesthetically, Arnak is probably the more beautiful game. Accessibility-wise, however, I don't know. It's not as complex as it seems. I think Arnak is potentially more family-friendly, but Dune provides a better challenge, and that's the reason why I prefer Dune Imperium over Lost Ruins of Arnak. However, this is not to say, as I said, that Lost Ruins of Arnak is not is still a good game. Many people enjoy it. I've not played either of them multiplayer, so maybe it's better in multiplayer. And I do know that CGE have released these even harder solo AI cards that you can download and print, and they are releasing a campaign mode for solo as well, which I think is really, really good. But out of the box, barring a few quibbles that I've got with Dune Imperium, and one of them's, the major one, is resolved by the app, I would say that I would prefer Dune Imperium any day of the week over Lost Ruins of Arnak. So, final thoughts on Dune Imperium by Direwolf, designed by Paul Dennen. Look, I think as you can tell from how I've spoken about this game from a solo experience, I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think it kind of gives you exactly what you want from a hybrid deck builder worker placement game. There are some quibbles, as I say, straight out of the box, how the card market works in the solo game. You're going to have to house rule that if you're not wanting to use the app to cycle through those cards. And maybe there are these paths to victory and this kind of early indication of a potential victor on the victory track. They can all have an effect there, but that doesn't take away from the fact I have an absolutely fantastic time. I can set it up in less than 10 minutes. I can play a game in less than an hour and put it away. But chances are, once I've played a game, is I'm going to want to play again. You've got the varying strength of these solo AI on there. The real kind of great thing that Direwolf had done is obviously release this companion app for the solo AI that really kind of makes handling this deck, well, it already is a breeze, but makes handling it a breeze, but also obviously provides you with an integrated way to cycle through that market. And it's got some nice background music as well, so it doesn't hurt to put it on in the background. However, as I say, if you're not wanting to use the app, this deck of cards is delightfully easy to use, and you just have to come up with a mechanism to cycle through there. I think it's great. I think maybe it would have been nice if they'd have potentially kind of put some of these upgraded components in with the game, and rather than sell them for an additional $50 afterwards. I won't be investing in that because as much as I love the game, it won't really add anything thematically to it, So I can understand why people might want to do that and bling that out, but it's not for me unless it was significantly cheaper than $50. It's a game that's not leaving my collection. It's a game that I'm quite happy to stay in my collection. It's not a top 10 game for me by any stretch of the imagination, but it's probably a top 20 game as it stands right now, and it really scratches a particular itch for me. It gives me what Arnak couldn't give me. That sense of player agency, that sense of adaptive strategy, that sense of many different paths to victory, rather than with Arnak, which seemed like one route to victory. It actually, out of the two games, if you put them both up to me before I bought either of them, I would have chosen Arnak purely on looks and from what I've read about it over Dune any day of the week. I'm happy to be proven wrong. As I say, I had Arnak, I sold Arnak to buy Dune Imperium. I'm not selling Dune Imperium as a solo player. I think if you're looking for a hybrid deck builder game and you're only going to buy one of them, I would recommend as a solo player buying Dune Imperium. However, if you want to buy them both, you know, it's still a pretty good position to be in. And there we go. Thank you very much for joining me on this review of the solo experience of Dune Imperium. I really enjoyed this game, as you can see. It scratched the itch that Arnak couldn't quite do for me, and I know it works for other people, Arnak, and that's absolutely fine. I really enjoyed the solo experience of Dune Imperium far more than I thought I would. So thank you once again for joining me on this review of Dune Imperium by Direwolf. I say, this is Not Board Gaming. My name is Mark. I've been your host. Please remember, you can always follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, or on Twitter, and that's Not Board Gaming, always BORED. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our other videos, and one final thought. If you can't find anybody else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time, bye-bye.